Hey, welcome back to the stash. There are villains in Daredevil's world that operate by rules. Kingpin rules the city from the shadows, moving his pieces like a master strategist. Bullseye is an assassin, a man who kills with precision driven by personal vendettas. Even the Hand, an ancient cult of assassins, function within a belief system no matter how twisted it is. But Muse? Muse doesn't follow rules. Muse doesn't care about power, revenge, or ideology. He isn't interested in crime or control. No, he only cares about his work. A mural painted in blood, a courtroom turned into a performance, the lines between life, death, and art blurred beyond recognition. To Muse, creation and destruction are the same thing, two sides of the same twisted canvas. And in his first appearance from the story Dark Arts, he proved just how terrifying that philosophy can be. Now with Daredevil Born Again bringing Muse into the MCU, the world is about to meet one of the most chilling villains in Marvel's history. But before that happens, let's take a look back at his haunting first ever story, where he made his debut not as a criminal, not as a mastermind, but as an artist. Before we get into that though, I just wanted to take a quick second to say that here at The Stash, we're trying to reach 7.1 thousand subscribers before the end of the month. It's a huge ask, but with your help, I know we can do it. So if you like Daredevil or just comic content in general, feel free to stick around and maybe hit that subscribe button. But anyway, with all that being said, let's get right back into the video. Muse's story begins with Dark Arts, a storyline that started in Daredevil issue 10 from 2016. But here's the thing, Muse doesn't even appear in this issue, and yet his presence is already chilling. Because the best horror villains don't just show up, they linger. They stain the world around them, and from the very first moment, Muse makes his mark, not with words, not with threats, but with something far more disturbing. It starts with a call. Blind Spot, Daredevil's protege/sidekick at the time, is panicked and desperate. He needs Matt's help immediately, for he's found something he doesn't know how to handle, a dead body. Matt Murdock, already on thin ice working for the DA, is risking everything just by answering this call. He's been pulling strings, stretching his double life to its absolute limit, but that doesn't matter, because this is bigger than keeping up appearances. And so with the quick excuse to Ellen, he suits up. Enter Daredevil. When Matt arrives at the scene, he isn't met with a crime, he's met with a masterpiece. A red mural, massive in scale, stretching across the wall like a grotesque vision of abstract horror. Every stroke, every smear, intentional, methodical, almost beautiful. But there's something else. Next to the corpse Blind Spot had found are buckets. Buckets filled with blood. So Daredevil focuses, he breathes in, and uses his gift from God to listen. And that's when the full horror of what they're looking at sinks in. For this isn't just one man's blood, this isn't the work of a single murder, because to paint something on this scale, to create something this large, this detailed, Muse didn't just take one life. He took at least 113. And this is just the beginning. The story shifts. We head to Brooklyn where we find an Inhuman, one created by the Terrigen Cloud, running for his life. His name is Marty, and right now, he's being hunted. A group of thugs are chasing him down, self-proclaimed enforcers of their neighborhood. They're simply people who see Inhumans as less than human. To them, Marty is an infection, something unnatural, something that needs to be cleansed. He pleads and begs with them, desperate to convince those surrounding him that he's still just a person, that he's still just like them. But no matter what, they don't listen. So with no other choice, he shows them his gift. Not strength, not flight, not fire or lightning or anything that could actually save his life or pose as a mere threat. Instead, he creates glow-in-the-dark snowflakes. The whole alley illuminates with beauty, shimmering in the dark. But to his attackers, it means nothing. They don't see the beauty, nor do they see the art. No, what they only see is a monster. Except someone else is watching, someone who does see it, someone who admires it. Before Marty's pursuers even have a chance to turn, a figure descends like a shadow, and in a blur, he kills them all. It isn't a fight or even a struggle, it's a massacre. Bodies drop, blood splatters, the very men who were ready to kill an innocent man now lie dead in the street. And as Marty watches in stunned silence, his breath caught in his throat, he turns to his so-called savior, and he asks with a shaking voice, "Did you just kill those guys?" The figure stares at him, standing tall and confident with a twisted look in his bloody eyes, like his mind is already racing with the possibilities on what he can create with just this one person. And so, he says to him, "Don't worry, it's all over now." Back in Washington Heights, the blood mural still stands, a grotesque monument, a twisted masterpiece left behind by a killer who sees himself as an artist. But for some, it isn't horror, it's an opportunity. The owner of the property, Freddy, isn't mourning the loss of life. He isn't even disturbed by the fact that over 100 people's blood is woven into the very fabric of this painting. No, he sees something else entirely. He sees a payday. To Freddy, this isn't a crime scene, it's a business opportunity. And to make sure he isn't leaving money on the table, he calls in an art professor, an expert who can tell him exactly what he's sitting on. Because clearly in Freddy's mind, the only thing that matters is whether or not this is worth anything. And the professor, he delivers an answer that Freddy likes. Given the nature of the piece, its grotesque infamy, its sheer controversy, there's of course a market for it. In fact, there's always a market. Freddy could sell this, and in today's world, he wouldn't have any trouble finding a buyer. But there's hesitation. The professor raises the obvious ethical concerns. Because this isn't just inspired by death, it's built from it. This is real. Over 100 people's lives ended to create this one piece. You might be asking yourself, how could anyone look at it and see value? But Freddy can, and he simply doesn't care. He isn't an artist, he isn't a curator, he isn't even a man reckoning with the horror of what's in front of him. No, he is a businessman, plain and simple. As long as the blood is on his private property, in his mind that's all that matters. But then, his son interrupts. Someone is complaining outside. He tells him it's a woman and she's brought the police. Outside stands Andrea Pearson, a councilwoman, speaker of the council to be specific, and she isn't here to make a deal. She's here to make this nightmare disappear. She demands the plan to profit off the mural to be cancelled. But Freddy, he won't budge. He knows his property rights. He knows what's his, and he isn't about to let anyone interfere with his payday. But Andrea doesn't fight with threats. She fights with a plea. She tries to appeal to his humanity, the sliver of a conscience that must be there somewhere. Because this isn't just a crime. This isn't just blood. It's personal. For some of the blood used in that mural belongs to Andrea's niece. And there it is, the weight of it. For Andrea, this isn't business, this isn't politics, this is grief. This is a family member stolen and twisted into something monstrous. She pleads, she begs, she tells Freddy that if he has any decency, if there's any shred of a person inside him that isn't just fueled by dollar signs, he'll shut this whole thing down, that he'll do the right thing. But Freddy doesn't see a grieving woman, nor the other 100 or so families dealing with the loss of a loved one. All he sees is a nuisance. He sees an obstacle, because to him, money are louder than humanity. And so, he's already made up his mind. Later that afternoon, the Duran Gallery is about to open its doors. The line stretches as far as the eye can see. People eager, curious, enthralled flock to see the horror firsthand. They don't care about the lives lost or even the ethics of it all. All they care about is seeing it, but that moment is short-lived. Because standing in the way is a court order thanks to none other than Matt Murdock. Thanks to Andrea's pressure, the district attorney has given Matt one last chance to save his job, and that's to put a stop to all this madness. And due to his efforts, the court has postponed the exhibition until further notice, and so the blood mural stays hidden behind closed doors. Freddy is furious. To him, this is sabotage, a business opportunity stolen from him. He creates a scene before storming inside the gallery, but when he looks up, he and the cops following him stop, because something is wrong. The mural is gone, it's been ruined, defaced and scrubbed away beyond salvage. In its place is an eerie message written in blood. You're only as good as your last performance. And beneath it, an address. Matt and Sam arrive at the address. The place is already surrounded by officers, and since Matt's office work hand in hand with the police, that means occasionally they get a sneak peek at the crime scenes. But the question Matt wonders is, what is it this time? Because this isn't another mural. This isn't art in the traditional sense. This is something far worse, something that immediately unsettles Matt and everyone who enters the room. Even without seeing it, his radar sense is painting a horrifying picture. He can feel the shapes, the silhouettes, the way the air moves around the room, and something is clearly wrong. The knot in his stomach tightens. Then Sam describes it, and it only gets worse. 6 bodies, all inhumans, and they're not just dead. They've been posed, arranged purposefully, each one placed in a different position, almost like they're living. One sits at a table, frozen mid-meal, one sits there emotionless watching TV, and another one is fixing a tire on a car. Every single one posed carefully with clear intention, as if they weren't brutally murdered, but more so captured in this moment, captured like art. And in that moment, the message becomes clear. Muse wasn't just killing, Muse was making a statement. There's a very clear point being made with the second piece. One such as, Inhumans are humans too. But then, all of a sudden there's a heartbeat. Matt hears it. It's fast, anxious, and unsteady. Someone is here. Matt makes a quick excuse, stepping away from the crime scene. His focus locked onto the sound as he follows it weaving through the building, listening and studying all that he can about it. But there's more than just a pounding heart. There's jittery movements, a presence just beyond reach. On the rooftop across the building, someone's watching, someone's nervous. Normally, criminals don't come back to the scene of the crime, no matter what crime shows would have you believe. Instead, they vanish. But the exception is arsonists. Arsonists return. In fact, they usually never leave because they like to watch it burn. And Muse isn't a criminal, at least not in his own mind. He's something else. He's an artist, and his latest piece, the scene below, the carefully posed bodies, the grotesque yet deliberate arrangement, is his grand unveiling. And there's one thing he needs to know, one thing that brought him here, sweaty and anxious, heart pounding in his chest. Muse is standing there, he's waiting, and in an instant, Daredevil moves. He vaults across the rooftops, launching himself through the night, his body cutting through the air in a silent, precise move. He lands. And standing there, as horrifying as ever, is Muse. He's still, with no expression save for the blood stained as tears flow into his heart. And he simply asked Daredevil, "Did you like my work?" The confrontation continues. Muse stands before Daredevil, his presence unsettling, his body surrounded by an ominous red glow that bleeds into the night, wrapping around them like the final stroke of a master's painting. His voice is calm yet eager. "Please tell me. It's important. Did you like it?" The red aura dissolves, vanishing as quickly as it appeared, and Daredevil, he wastes no time. "Who are you?" asks our hero. "The papers," Muse says, has been calling him Vincent Van Gogh. A fitting title, yes, but he's been toying with something else, a simpler, more refined name. That name being the one that we're all familiar with, Muse. But Muse isn't here to talk about his name, because there's something else, something far more pressing on his mind, and this time his voice carries a hint of impatience. And so he asks once more, "Did you like my work?" Daredevil's response is immediate, sharp, and cutting. "You mean the people you murdered?" But Muse doesn't flinch, he doesn't see it that way. To him, murder is such a crude, simplistic term, because from his point of view, if a person wants to die, then it isn't murder at all. Instead, that's something else entirely. That's a gift. Muse speaks with conviction and with certainty. To him, there is no crime here, no horror at all. Rather, only art. Daredevil doesn't wait for further explanation. With a snap of his wrist, he hurls his billy club, a precise, unerring shot. It heads straight for Muse's head, although it never lands. With unsettling ease, Muse catches it. No effort, no strain, and he calmly says, "So you didn't like it? Oh well, my next one will be better." He then drops the now broken billy club to the ground. Daredevil, now the impatient one, demands answers, demands to know why he's doing all of this. But Muse doesn't owe explanations, because as an artist, he has a strict code he lives by, one quite simple. Never explain and never apologize. Because to him, a true artist doesn't justify their vision, but rather lets the audience feel it. And so to illustrate his point, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out a grenade. And without breaking eye contact, he pulls the pin. But he doesn't release it. Muse watches Daredevil's reaction. He wants to see it. The fear, the anticipation, the understanding that something is coming but not knowing when. Daredevil moves. He dives for cover as his instinct takes over. And Muse simply speaks. Here's the thing about the creative spirit. It's fickle. One minute it's there, but the next, as if finishing off the sentence for him, the grenade explodes, ripping through the silence of the night. When the dust settles, Daredevil listens. He searches for the sound of a heartbeat, a breath, or even for any sign of his foe's presence, but he's met with nothing. For Muse is gone, because there was almost no heat, no pressure in that grenade. It was never real. Rather, it was something else entirely. It was a performance. Back at the warehouse, the new Adelan security team is hard at work. They're running tests, analyzing the bodies and trying to make sense of it all through science. But science won't explain this, because this isn't about logic. This isn't about biology, genetics, or forensic evidence. This is about art, and art doesn't follow rules. Matt finds Frank McGee, the head of new Adelan's security team, and they begin to talk. McGee tells Daredevil that if it were up to him, he'd work with humans to bring Muse down. But it's not his choice, it's Medusa's. She's now the leader of the Inhumans, and if Daredevil wants cooperation, he'll have to ask her. So Daredevil does exactly that. He requests an audience with Medusa, and before he can even get a word in, she already refuses him. Daredevil's patience snaps. He doesn't hide his frustration, his voice rises, his fists clench. He's had enough. There's a killer running wild out there, and to him, that's all that matters. But that's when Karnak steps in. Karnak is one of the deadliest warriors alive. Not because of strength, not because of speed, but rather because he sees the flaws in everything. And when he fights, he doesn't hit, he breaks. And so the battle commences. It's fast and brutal. Daredevil dodges, counters, strikes, but Karnak is always somehow 2 steps ahead. He breaks down his movement, he exploits weaknesses Daredevil doesn't even realize he has. But Daredevil is no ordinary fighter. He adapts, he learns, and in the end, he wins. Breathing heavily, fists still clenched, he turns back to Medusa. And this time, he makes his case properly. And the answer, after all the effort he's just used to get even this far, is still no. Matt is rightfully seething, and McGee sees it. And so before things can escalate further, he pulls Daredevil aside, asking Matt to take a walk with him. Daredevil hesitates. He listens to McGee's heartbeat. He can hear it steady, that Frank's being honest and not a threat. So he follows. As they step outside, McGee tries to reassure him, telling Matt that he's on their side, but he has to be patient. But asking for Matt to be patient after everything Muse has done, after all the blood, all the lives turned into artwork, it's just not possible for someone like Daredevil. But McGee then helps Matt understand Medusa's reasoning. He explains that she needs to prove that she's a trustworthy queen to her people. She has to prove that she can protect the Inhumans without outside help, even if it means refusing Daredevil as well as Frank. Because it turns out Medusa turned McGee away once before too, and now Daredevil was feeling exactly what he felt. The two then continue the conversation until suddenly, Matt's phone vibrates. He's receiving a call from Blindspot. Sam's voice is a whisper. Matt immediately notices it. Something's wrong. He tells Matt how he went back to the office after leaving the warehouse and explains that afterwards he was helping out in the courtroom, but Matt interrupts him. He asks Sam why he's whispering, only for Blindspot to reveal that Muse is in that very courtroom. Daredevil doesn't hesitate and orders Sam to not engage, for Muse is beyond him, beyond his experience and beyond his skill. Blindspot simply just isn't ready for someone like this. But Sam is stubborn. Muse is standing in the middle of a courtroom holding a knife to a judge's throat. He isn't posturing, he isn't bluffing. Blindspot knows exactly what kind of man Muse is. So he asks the question, what if he tries to hurt him? For a few seconds, Matt doesn't answer, and then his voice firm and unshaken outlines 2 clear rules. 1, don't die, and 2, don't let anyone else die. You follow both if you can. But there will come a time where you can only follow one. It's inevitable, part of the job. When it does, you make your choice and you live with it. Or you don't. Sam doesn't respond because deep down, he knows Matt is right. Meanwhile, Muse continues to toy with the tension in the room. His grip on the judge never tightens nor loosens. He's calm and composed. If anything, Muse is enjoying this. And then he begins to talk about his knife. A simple thing. Nothing special at first glance, but Muse believes beauty can be found in anything. He begins to depict a tale about the very weapon that he holds in his hand. Muse tells the courtroom that his knife was once inside a woman. She wasn't very attractive, Muse must admit, and then his bloody eyes glisten, empty, void of anything normal as he says, "But just look at her now." One of the officers snaps with his gun raised, telling him to lose the knife. Muse complies. He casually releases it by launching the weapon straight at the officer. He drops to the ground, the knife lodged deep in his throat. Muse never flinched, never hesitated, as if it was all simply a part of the performance. Chaos erupts, screams and gunshots are everywhere, and Muse makes his move. Dragging the judge by the neck, he makes a run for it. On the other end of the call, Daredevil hears everything, the panic and the commotion, and demands to know what happened. Sam quickly explains before hanging up, for he knows what he has to do. Muse is escaping, and he has to stop him, whether he's ready or not. Outside the courthouse, Muse still holds the judge, but this time in his free hand, he holds a detonator. SWAT officers move in, weapons raised, their voices firm, commanding, and desperate to regain control. One of them offers Muse a final chance to let them all talk it out, but as we saw from before, Muse prefers to let his work speak for itself. And so with one press of the button, the building erupts. From a distance, Daredevil and Frank McGee race towards the scene. Flashes of colors fill the night sky as the courthouse trembles. For a moment, it looks like pure destruction, but then Matt and Frank realize that something is off. And once Sam calls, it only confirms their suspicions. Like before with the grenade, there's no heat, just sound and noise. Muse never intended to destroy the courthouse. He just wanted to put on a show. And now he's already gone. Invisible to the world, Blind Spot follows Muse into the sewers. He watches as Muse drags the judge deeper into the underground. Muse cuts through the dim, filthy tunnels with the confidence of a man walking into his own studio. And as Blind Spot moves in, something strange happens. Doubt creeps in, not about Muse, but rather about the danger, and more importantly, about himself. Why am I doing this? He continuously asks himself. I mean, no one asked him to. No one told him he had to go this far. And as he watches Muse move like a spectre in the darkness, his own thoughts start to betray him as he wonders if this is even worth it. Finally, Muse reaches his destination, a forgotten empty cavern deep in the sewers, a place where no one will hear the screams. And then, he finally drops the judge. Across the damp stone floor, tied and trembling, sit 3 more victims. There's 4 people in total, 4 perfect pieces for his next work. Muse squats down to meet them at eye level, and begins to eerily express his appreciation. "I just want to say, I appreciate you. I couldn't realize my vision without each and every one of you," he says, his voice soft and warm. And then, in deep thought, he asks them all a question. "Do you think the symbolism is too obvious?" His eyes scan them, as though searching for inspiration. He then continues. "A judge, a politician, 2 officers, the entire legal system from start to finish. Specifically, the 4 people who conspired to shut down public access to my beautiful blood mural. So I thought, present the work then down here, with everything else that's gone down the toilet." Muse continues to ramble, his tone almost academic, as though explaining art to a group of students. Symbolism is tricky. It's a fine line. Too little and no one gets the point. Too much and it's just obvious. Art should never be obvious. His victims remain silent, terrified, paralyzed in their own bodies. They are props to him, no different than any ordinary paint and brush. But something is missing. Muse stops and begins to ponder. What could it possibly be? Granted, he admits this is quite a challenging piece for him. And then, with one swift motion, he lashes out. His knife sings through the air, carving through flesh in a clean, practiced stroke. The officer screams, for his ear has just been cut off. Muse believes that sometimes the only way to approach something like this is to start cutting. Blood spills down the officer's neck, splattering onto the damn stone like an unfinished painting. And just like that, Blind Spot breaks. He yells for Muse to stop, revealing himself in the process. Muse's hollow, bloody eyes ignite with realization. Of course, how could he have not seen it before? A piece about modern injustice. A piece about corruption, power, law enforcement, the system itself. And he left out the vigilante. To him, it's a grotesque oversight, one that he's about to correct. With one swift motion, Muse hurls his weapon at Blind Spot. Sam barely reacts in time. His staff swings up, deflecting the strike. His body knows what to do. His mind, though, not so much. Because he's still battling within himself, still questioning. Does he stay? Does he fight? Is this even worth it? And then finally, he runs. He goes through the filthy tunnels, sprinting at full speed with his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. But no matter how far he goes, how fast he is, it always feels like Muse is right behind him. And the worst part? Muse never stops talking. From how much of a fan he is, to revealing how he always wanted Muse to be the first person to see the blood mural. He even tells him the name of it. Blind Spot's legs burn, but he doesn't stop. Muse tells him how much he regrets Sam coming down here, because now he's seen his next piece before it's finished, and Muse simply won't allow that. Then suddenly, a kick. Sam slams into the ground. Muse stands behind him, his tone almost affectionate. He tells Sam he should be honored, for he's going to be part of something that matters. He's going to be a part of Muse's new piece. But then Blind Spot in an instant vanishes. Muse's tone quickly shifts, and then his fury ignites. Sam doesn't waste time. He races back to the hostages, he frees them and ushers them through the winding tunnels. Every second counts, every breath feels like it might be his last, and somewhere behind them, Muse is coming. Blind Spot leads them towards an exit, pushing them forward, making sure they're safe. And the entire time, Matt's words play over and over in his mind. Don't let anyone else die, and don't die. The hostages escape. They're free. And now it's just him and Muse. Blind Spot turns and runs again. He reaches for his invisibility switch, but this time, nothing happens. The batteries are dead. His greatest advantage is gone, and so naturally, panic sets in. His breathing shortens, his heart races. And then, he sees it. A ladder, a way out. Relief rushes through him as he climbs, one step at a time, his fingers gripping the cold metal, his body aching but moving faster and faster. He dials Matt's number. The phone rings as he lets out a deep breath. Finally, a moment of safety. But then, unbeknown to Sam, hands cold and clawing silently pull him back down. In an instant, he's gone, dragged back into the dark. Matt's voice echoes from the phone above, begging for a response. But all he's met with is deafening silence. The next day, Matt and Frank finally find Sam's phone. Frank tries to suggest maybe Sam just lost it, but Daredevil assures McGee Muse has got him. As Frank begins to talk, Daredevil zones out and sits down with his legs crossed. As far as he's concerned, Frank right now is a distraction. And so doing what he's done oh so many times before, Matt simply listens. He pushes his radar sense to their limits. He has to find Sam. His nose begins to bleed, his face full of concentration, and then finally, Matt finds him. We cut to Muse taking Blind Spot to his garret. It's filled with limbs hanging, blood in buckets, an unfinished painting, and other sorts of monstrosities. He rambles once more to Sam. He tells him he technically shouldn't be seeing any of this. It's a real look behind the curtain. There's this mystique about art, a shared fiction. An artist presents a piece to the world in its finished form and pretends that it simply appeared that way, effortlessly birthed from his genius. Both artist and audience prefer to believe that's the truth. It's nice to think that the really good creators have some direct connection to the divine. But it's all a lie. It's agony. Muse then asks Sam, what does he think? Sam, with horror in his eyes, tells Muse he doesn't have to do this. Muse frowns, berating Sam for saying such a thing, acting like he wouldn't have told himself that in the first place. It's just after the first one, this lady Muse had picked up and turned into something abstract. He told himself he shouldn't, that it was wrong, but it didn't feel wrong. No, the truth is when he's creating, when he's making, he's strong, he is right. But Muse has noticed people don't understand what he does. They object to his preferred medium. He only has so much time to work before someone manages to stop him. He needs to use every moment. So yes, he tells Blind Spot, he has to do this, because if he doesn't, then who will? As he turns back to face Sam, he notices something has caught his eye. That something being what Muse has done to Ten Fingers. Muse continues to talk about the potential he saw in someone like him, as well as what he plans to do with Sam. But before he can continue, Daredevil bursts through the window and immediately throws his billy club, but just like their first encounter, Muse easily catches it. Daredevil tells his foe to get away from Sam, or else he'll break every bone in his body. The threat has no effect on Muse. In fact, he couldn't care less. But then, he reveals that he thinks he's just figured it out. Suddenly, he's feeling inspired. Muse launches his two fingers straight into Sam's eyes. Daredevil watches in horror as Muse is thrilled with himself. He asks Daredevil if he sees it. Blind Spot. Muse finds it beautiful, and then throws Sam into Daredevil's arms as blood flies through the air like a lost trail. Daredevil tries to comfort Sam, but he whispers something. Sam informs Matt that he thinks the people used for the blood mural are somewhere here, still alive, and tells Daredevil one of the rules. Don't let anyone else die. Matt rushes after Muse until without warning, he lunges from behind. The two battle it out. Matt tries to choke Muse, but he uses his weight against him as he flips him down the stairs. When Matt lands, his radar sense goes into overdrive, painting him a picture like he's never seen before. Countless of drained bodies lie hanging from the ceiling with their blood slowly dripping into buckets below. Sam was right. Now Daredevil must save them. Muse, standing next to the rope holding them all up, asks Matt a simple question. Why does he care about these people? Muse continues. Don't you realize they're better off? Their lives mean something now. It doesn't matter if they die here, they're immortal. You'll never get it. Muse then cuts the rope, causing hundreds of bodies to fall to the ground. Matt panics. He's not about to lose him again, but he must stop these people from receiving any more harm. So after he makes sure they don't, he rushes back after Muse, only to find him surrounded by Frank McGee and his security team. Daredevil is full of rage and walks up to Muse. Frank wants him to stay back. He'll be punished for what he's done. Frank swears it. It's over. But not to Matt, it isn't. He tells Frank about how Muse took Sam's eyes, and asks him how on earth will he be punished for that. Muse chimes in, calm as ever, and tells him that he thinks he can help, and proceeds to break all of his own fingers. This is what you're going to do, infers Muse. Something like this? Make it impossible for me to create art again? Daredevil and Frank look at him with disgust. Don't worry, happy to do it. It's better for the story, Muse says. Matt, fed up with everything, walks up close and asks him what he is as he pulls off his mask, revealing a haunting, nightmarish face, with Muse simply replying with, a man in a mask. The security team take Muse away as Frank promises he will pay for all he's done. Although right now, Matt is more concerned about Sam. Luckily, the Inhuman officers have found him, and they're going to try with all their power to hopefully heal him. Matt stands beside Sam and apologizes to his foul protege. But Sam asks him one thing. Did he save them? Daredevil tells him yes, he did. Every single one. Blind Spot turning his head, as if to allow himself to finally rest, as if his mind has finally been put to ease, replies with, then, it was all worth it. Like I said way back in the start of this video, Muse is unlike any other villain in Daredevil's world. He isn't chasing power like Kingpin, he isn't driven by revenge like Bullseye, he has no grand ideology, no personal vendetta. He doesn't even see himself as a criminal. He sees himself as an artist, and that's what makes him terrifying. Because you can't reason with art. You can't make a deal with it, can't predict it, can't stop it with logic, it just exists with or without your approval. His debut story, Dark Arts, isn't just a crime thriller, it's a horror story, one that lingers long after the final page. Muse's victims don't get grand fights or last words. They get posed like statues, reduced to nothing but materials for his twisted vision. And even when he loses, even when he's locked away, he still wins, because art leaves an impact, and Muse always left his mark. Now with Daredevil Born Again bringing him into the MCU, his legacy is bound to grow. And there's a lot of questions. How much of his horror will make it to the screen? How much of his madness, his obsession, his raw unpredictability will survive the adaptation? And that all remains to be seen. But if they get him right, if they capture even a fraction of the terror of his first appearance, then audiences won't just remember Muse. Instead, they'll never forget him.